Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Let's see here. Let me get some of my settings right. There we go. good. That's good. Welcome, everybody, to Friday Reflections. Hi, I'm Peter Bolland. You are on the air with San Diego Oasis. Thanks for registering. Thanks for logging in. We're always so thrilled that you're continually agreeing to be a part of this experience that we all co-create together here. Gotta hit one of those again here at San Diego Oasis. So if I haven't met you before, welcome to the show. And my name's Peter Bolland. I'm a professor of humanities and philosophy at Southwestern College, where I teach world religions and world mythology and Asian philosophy and sometimes ethics. And I've been doing that for about 30 years, and it is a real pleasure to get off campus once in a while and come into spaces like this to be with y'all and to think through how these wisdom traditions might be useful to all of us, not just college students who are undergrads stuck in a required humanities experience, but people like you and I who actually sign up and volunteer for this sort of inquiry, for this sort of thing. So I am thrilled that you are here, and I'm very grateful that you are here. We are winding down the year. Here it is, deeper and deeper into December. This weather around here in San Diego certainly reminding us that winter is coming, and essentially, in my mind, it's here. Listen, here's what I want to work through with you today. You know, in our little kind of I'm thinking about this like group therapy session. I'm thinking about the word resilience today. I just got booked at a aging conference for next year, and the topic I'll be talking about is resilience, and that is a powerful word, isn't it? To persevere, to retain one's flexibility and core strength in the face of a terrible storm, you know, to weather a storm. And I just wanted to be kind of vulnerable with you and open-hearted as we often are here at Friday Reflections. You know, it's been a tough last year and a tough last couple of years for all of us. And I just had to kind of deal with a really tough and disappointing professional disappointment. This has to do with my work at Southwestern College. It would take the whole half hour to describe the whole situation to you. But basically, in my role as department chair, I did not successfully meet a goal. We had one of my colleagues retire last May, and normally when a professor retires, it's automatic that they get replaced, that we hire another full-time professor. But I did all the analytical studies of, you know, students and class sections and enrollments, and I gathered all the data, built the case that we deserve to get a new hire, but there's a hiring committee and process, big bureaucratic institution, right? And I didn't make the cut. 36 other faculty are going to get hired. I was number 37 on the list, missed it by that much. So the last month, I've been having high-level meetings with the college president, vice president, deans, the co-chairs of the FHP committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Tons of emails and pleading the case over and over and over. We didn't get it. Instead, they're hiring $2.5 million worth of new deans, building new programs and new directors. So administrators see the solution to college problems as hiring more administrators. Faculty sees the solution to college problems as hiring more full-time faculty who are actually the frontline people who interface with students. So there is as short as I can describe it. So I've been very angry this week and bitter and resentful and in a pretty dark place, and I am having to use all of that as fuel for my own, of course, philosophical and spiritual inquiry, at having to manage all of that and not write angry emails to anybody. You know, keep my cool, be professional, don't burn any bridges. There's no point in lashing out at people. Everybody's just trying to do the right thing, and yet in the back of my mind, it's bullshit. It's awful. It's grotesquely unfair. And that's how it is. You know, I remember reading Camus for the first time, that life is fundamentally absurd, that it doesn't really make that much sense. That and so that's what drew me to traditions like Buddhism and Taoism, how to be resilient in the face of disappointment and suffering, how to let go of expectations, that I'm not in charge of the world, right? I don't get what I want, even though it's not for me, right? It's the right thing to do. We need to hire a new philosophy professor. It's extremely rational and prudent and et cetera, et cetera. And yet it didn't happen. So now I'm like, ugh, I wish I could just quit, go live on a beach. I wish I could just retire now instead of work 7 more years until I can retire. And all that childish sort of, I just want to take my toys and run away kind of stuff, you know? And so that is what we have all had to deal with in our professional lives, in our family lives, in our personal lives. You know, stuff doesn't go our way. And this time of year, Christmas, maybe that's part of the formula. You know, it gets dark, it gets cold. Here comes Christmas with all of that baggage and those big expectations, and, you know, how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with sadness. My colleague Matt Wyan is going to be here in the Oasis space right after me at 11 o'clock this morning. I think his talk is called Blue Christmas or something like that. Beautiful. I love Matt. And if you haven't had a seminar or webinar with Matt Wyan, check that out if you haven't registered for it already. He's brilliant. And I'm honored to work alongside him. And he's doing a whole thing on that Blue Christmas stuff. Oh, there it is in the chat. You are great, Kristen. I just adore you. So there's the link to the 11 o'clock this morning webinar if you're free. And you know how it works around here. Even if you're not free, register for it because you're going to get the video afterwards. But this is a real thing, you know, the sadness of the holidays and the unmet expectations. And frankly, as I said before, the fundamental absurdity of life. How it just doesn't really make sense. And it's difficult to navigate the disappointment and the unmet expectations of life in general and of Christmas in particular. And as we look around us, whether we're talking about social justice or political processes or how this damn pandemic is going, you know, the right things rarely happen and the wrong things keep happening. And it's enough to beat you down. I have so many friends, and I'm talking about people who are sort of politically active people who have completely withdrawn from the political social justice sphere. They just aren't talking about it anymore. They aren't reading about it anymore because a lot of us have just gone into triage self-care mode. It's like, I'm losing my freaking mind here. I can't take the news anymore. I just can't. And so there's that sense of withdrawal, and maybe that's not a bad thing right now. We won't always feel this way. But, you know, this business of adulting means navigating chaos. And so many of us, especially at this Christmas time, you know, I talk about Hanukkah too, but it's already behind us, right? So I'm focusing on Christmas and whatever holiday celebrations you and your folks engage with. But Christmas is a pretty big deal around here, so I'll talk about that. You know, a lot of people find that they live on their own. They live alone. They do okay most of the year, but then along comes Christmas and those endless TV commercials of happy, raucous family gatherings around beautifully laden and well-lit tables, and everybody's just quirky enough to be likable, and it just triggers that maybe unmet need we have for maybe that perfect family that we didn't get to have, or that lasting marriage that we didn't get to have, or those perfect relationships with our adult children that sometimes we don't get to have, because a lot of us live with family estrangement. Maybe you had to let go of your parents, or maybe some of your adult kids have let go of you. And we've sometimes had to let go of siblings. We just, you know, something happened years ago and we just kind of both mutually silently agreed that we're better off without each other. And along comes Christmas and that Norman Rockwell fantasy of our perfect family united around a table. And what about the financial stress of it all, and you know, not having enough money to travel or to engage in all the high-end gift giving that we kind of want to do maybe, but just don't have the money for that. And what about that nameless anxiety and dread. And then here's the deal. And then we'll get into some solutions. I know I've been sound like a lament so far, but just want to, make sure we dig down into the problem first, and then we'll spend the second half of our time together today looking for solutions and pathways out of the darkness. But finally, you look around to your friends and your family or whoever's around. You look around for some help, like who can throw you a life preserver, and then you look into their eyes and you realize they're kind of drowning too. That we're all in these lifeboats floating around in the storm. Where do you go for help? Who can you turn to? And so it all sort of is a little overwhelming this time of year. And I want to just acknowledge that. I happen to have the good fortune of good relationships with both of my brothers, and I'm just dumb luck blessed with a really incredible partner, Lori. And we've been together, we've known each other for 40 years. We've been married for 36. So not everybody is that fortunate. And yet here I am still a fairly miserable person. So maybe it doesn't have to do with all of these outer arrangements, that we know that it is not a new world that we need. Haven't we talked about this so many Fridays here? We know that it is not a new world that we need, or that we can really fairly ask for. It is new eyes with which to see the world that I need. It's inner work, isn't it? It's not about me getting what I want at work, or me getting the perfect family, or, this strange fantasy of the ideal that I project, compare my own life to, and it always falls short. And then I get to be miserable. And we learn that in Stoicism, we learn that in Buddhism, that I am the caretaker of my own emotional architecture. And okay, I'm going to feel my feelings. And in fact, that's, I think, the first thing I want to think about with you today, as for in terms of, now that we've acknowledged the problem, what are 4 sources that I turn to for solace and repair of this dis-ease, right? Of this miserableness that sometimes haunts us, especially during the holidays or around any disappointing thing. Whenever I give talks like this in public, I see people crying in the audience because they just buried their spouse in September. And this is their first Christmas without her or him. Or even worse, buried a child lost to a drug overdose or a motorcycle accident or a terminal illness. Some people really have obvious, justifiable cause to be in a really tough place right now. And I think of my own blessed surroundings and how free I am of that particular wound. But there are people all around us who are not free of that, and we don't know. The people you see at the grocery store, the woman or man who walks up and down the street and delivers our mail, we don't know. And so what I'm starting with here is, number 1, I am giving myself permission to feel my feelings. Sorry if that sounds a little self-helpy, but I think it's profound to say, you know what, I feel like crap today. I'm just going to feel like crap today. And I'm not going to try to medicate it away. I'm not going to try to rush too soon towards solutions. I'm not going to explain it away with spiritual bypassing. We'll talk more about spiritual bypassing in a future program. But that's when you sort of misuse spiritual platitudes to not feel your feelings. Well, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and it's all for the best. Something good will come of it. And I get that. And I say that. And I actually believe that. All those things are true. But sometimes that's the last thing you want to hear when you're hurting, is that this is going to turn into something good later. One of the subtexts of that platitude is, don't feel bad right now. You are wrong to feel like crap. And I know that's not how it's intended, but that's one of the possible takeaways that the person in grief is feeling, even though it is empirically true that yes, something good is coming. But maybe that's not what is really, maybe we use that to avoid feeling our feelings. Again, this is an inquiry here. I'm not telling anybody how to navigate this. But as I navigate this, I think I need to give sorrow its season. I need to let anger turn from flames to embers on its own. I'm not going to shame myself or scold myself out of being pissed off for a while. I'm going to let anger, the flames of anger die down to embers on their own. And that might take 3 hours. That might take 3 days. I'm going to let it happen on its own. And I'm going to learn how to wait. Those lines from the Tao Te Ching keep jumping up. You know, do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles? Don't, rushing into action, you fail. Rushing into action, you destroy what was almost ripe. So sometimes I need to leave it alone. That's the yin. The second lesson or insight that I see in the work that I do is to take lessons from nature. We've talked so often here about John Muir and Mary Oliver and Thoreau and countless other voices, and our own experience with just hiking through the neighborhood along the lake shore, up in the hills, along the beach. And noticing that when it turns cold and dark, nature slows down, nature withdraws, nature draws its energies in to pull back. All the plants right now, I've got these beautiful liquid amber trees, both sides of me in my neighborhood. They just beautiful deciduous trees whose leaves have all turned red and gold and yellow. And with this storm coming next week, isn't it cool how they call storms now atmospheric rivers? When I was a kid, there was no such thing as atmospheric rivers. I dig it. It's like rivers in the sky. That's cool. Anyway, big rain and storm coming next week here for us in the Southland. I expect most of those leaves from both trees will mysteriously blow into my driveway. But I love it because I love all those leaves underfoot, right? And the tree lets go of its leaves and it moves all of its energies into its core and into its roots and just waits. There's some good advice. What about the 4 agreements? We often think about that around here too, right? Don Miguel Ruiz's beautiful classic. 1, be impeccable with your word. Speak truthfully. Don't exaggerate. Tell the truth. 2, don't take anything personally. That is so good. The stuff that happened to me at work didn't happen to me. In fact, it ultimately and actually factually has nothing to do with me. So I maybe need to shift and stop thinking about it as some sort of personal wound. I just tried really hard to make something happen. It didn't happen. And I didn't want to make it happen just because Peter Bolland wanted it. I tried to make it happen because that's my professional duty as department chair to fight for my department. But I just lost, I just lost. And I don't get to have that. My department now is going to have to limp along for another year until next fall when we start all over again with this potential hiring process. So it doesn't have anything to do with me. Nothing others do is because of you. That's what that second agreement means. Don't take anything personally. And number 3, don't make assumptions. Don't impart motives on others that they probably don't have. Don't turn people that you are in conflict with into enemies. They're not out to get you. And fourthly, always do your best. Just And sometimes our best is not as good as it is on our strongest days. Sometimes we're a little weaker, a little sicker, a little more mentally defeated. And my best today is not going to look like it did when I was, red hot and ready to go. Today, my best might look quite different. So those four agreements are always powerful places for me to turn. And then finally, the fourth source I'm thinking about today is a Christian mystic, a woman who lived in the 1300s. She was born in 1342, Julian of Norwich. So this is a British and English woman. She wasn't a nun. She was a layperson from her town Norwich in England in the 1300s, and they had just survived the bubonic plague. I mean, talk about hard times. I got my little problem, I didn't get a philosophy hire. You have your problems, but we are in a pandemic, yes, and still over 1,000 people die every day in this country. 1,500, about 10,000 a week. 10,000 Americans continue to die every day from a preventable disease that most of us have 3 shots in the arm to prevent us. So all you unvaccinated people, you're welcome. The reason you're able to traipse around unvaccinated is because all of us vaccinated people have made it very difficult for COVID to survive. And yet, because there's still so many Americans unvaccinated and around the world, it continues to thrive. And we are in a pandemic winter peak. Numbers are doing this again. And so echoes of the bubonic plague, but in the bubonic plague, about a third of England died. So we ain't to that level of horror yet. But we're in a bad place because of this pandemic, so it's analogous. But I turned to her because, of course, look, she's a Roman Catholic, right? So that may not be your tradition, and it isn't mine either. But I find it so powerful. Her Stoic Buddhist Christian prayers. She wrote this. She said, "Accept as a gift whatever comes or does not come. Accept that you don't know everything, and that you are not in charge." I say that prayer every morning, and I've got a whole sheet here that I use for our morning prayers, and they're all from her, because I just think she's amazing, and it works for me. You all find your own, but accept as a gift whatever comes or does not come. Boy, was that medicine for me this week. Accept that you don't know everything. Yeah, I don't. I don't know how the hiring process at Southwestern College works. I wasn't in all the high-level budget meetings. I don't know why all those 36 faculty hires beat out my philosophy hire. I wasn't in those meetings. I didn't read their proposals, their data. I don't know anything. And that, accept that you are not in charge. Oh, I need to hear that one a lot too, because the ego just keeps grabbing the reins and saying, let me run the world, let me run the world, let me run the world. That's wrong, that's wrong, that's okay, that's sort of okay, but that's wrong and that's not okay. That judginess from my own egoic limited perspective. So Julian of Norwich, a terrific source for me. Let me leave you with one last story before we close out with our poem, of course. And this is a little preview of the Christmas talk I'm going to do on Tuesday. I'll drop this story in that webinar too. But this story just really kills me. I'm thinking about a guy called Robert May. Robert May, and he was born in the early part of the 20th century. And he was an only child, and he grew up as a stutterer, which connected me to him right away because I stuttered terribly as a boy, and I still do sometimes. So me and Joe Biden, stutterers who kind of got over it a little bit. I think I do a little better than Joe does even on some days. But anyway, Robert May was teased terribly as a child because of his speech impediment. He was bullied his whole childhood. And as an adult, he was a writer, but he was an ad copy writer. He was writing ad copy for whoever, in New York. And he got a job working for the Montgomery Ward catalog. And one year, Montgomery Ward was going to put out its catalog in 1939, and as the Depression is ending. And he created a coloring book that was a free insert inside the catalog, and he invented a new character for this coloring book, and it was Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. So as you recall from the poem from the 1800s, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," there were 8 reindeer. And the reindeer even got names in that poem, Blitzen and Donner and Blitzen and all those. And so 8 reindeer for decades and decades and decades and decades. And then in 1939, Robert May just makes up a 9th one. And that whole story about him having this defect of a red nose, and all the other reindeers made fun of him, right? He was a freak. He was a misfit. He was different. And so this, and we all know what happens, right? 10 years later, Robert May's brother-in-law, a guy called Johnny Marks, writes the song, "Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer," which we all know. You're probably singing the rest of it now already. So that song came out in 1949. Gene Autry recorded it. You remember maybe who that is. He was called the Singing Cowboy. Huge pop star in the 40s and into the 50s. That record, Gene Autry's recording of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, was the best. It shot right to #1, and it was the best-selling record in history until 1980. And I'm struck by that story because Robert May, who invented this story and invented this character of this imperfect reindeer, who ended up becoming the hero, you all know the story, right? It was because of his red nose. It was because of his deficiency. It was because of his aberration that he became useful and was able to give that suffering, give that gift to the community. And he saved Christmas. So it's just this really perennially powerful story of how it is our limitation. It is out of our woundedness that our boundless healing comes, healing that we can then offer to others. And I'm thinking about that today in terms of all this sort of darkness that we've been ruminating about here, turning our pain into purpose. It is our action that is going to heal ourselves. It is our ability to help others. Maybe it's time to think about getting serious this weekend about cooking a couple hundred cookies, making a couple hundred cookies to put on little plates to go and give to all of the neighbors that you maybe haven't talked to in a few years, if ever. Maybe it's get some friends together to help you, have a cookie baking day. I'm not giving you an order here. I'm thinking about what action looks like. Simple things that you and I can do to get us out of our own heads. Maybe that's the piece. Maybe that's the step that could end up healing us, It's worth experimenting with. I keep referencing Gandhi in his autobiography, my experiments with truth. Since sitting around here and brooding isn't helping, maybe I'll get busy. Maybe I'll put my hands into it and turn this into something beautiful for someone else, and then the healing will begin to well up through the cracks in my own broken heart. It comes from a mysterious place, doesn't it? I don't manufacture healing. It's something that you allow. But where we do have power is perhaps in taking these action steps. So let me close out the session here with a poem, as we always do. I found a real beauty again, thanks to my friends over on Facebook, Echoes of Panhala. I think that's who I stole this one from. Maybe it was somebody else, but Rainer Maria Rilke. Do you know that poet? Rilke, R-I-L-K-E, German guy, Rainer Maria Rilke. So this is from his book called Book of Hours. Love Poems to God, translated by Anita Barrows and Joanna Macy. I believe in all that has never been spoken, by Rainer Maria Rilke. I believe in all that has never been spoken. I want to free what waits within me, so that what no one has dared to wish for may for once spring clear without my contriving. If this is arrogant, God, forgive me. But this is what I need to say. May what I do flow from me like a river, no forcing and no holding back, the way it is with children. Then, in these swelling and ebbing currents, these deepening tides moving out, returning, I will sing to you as no one ever has, streaming through widening channels into the open sea. Rainer Maria Rilke, I believe in all that has never yet been spoken. Happy Christmas to those who celebrate. Thank you for sharing some of your time with us here at Friday Reflections. One more Friday Reflections next Friday, then we'll take a little hibernation and see you all next year. Registration for all of spring events begins December 18th. All right, my friends, see you on the other side.